back. So I'm going to do my sketchbook here, and you can't really find them anymore. I haven't looked in the last 2 or 3 years. Maybe there's some out there now. This used to be one of the companies, and you could check on it, Michael Rogers Press or Roger Press. But all it is acid. It says acid-free recycled. It's actually cardstock, like you'd use for a greeting card or a business card. And you can actually buy it. This is oatmeal colored. And you can buy these, and that you might have a company that can buy it. If not, you could go to, in the States, it's Kinko's or the Office depots and stuff, the office supply places, and they do printing and binding. So any place that has printing and binding, they even have craft stores that you can do your own, but you can bind it any way you want to bind it. And then you've got your setup. And the reason I like this is it's brown, so it's kind of brown school. We start rather than white. We start with an off color here. And so it's already glazed away from that white. And then it's nice and stiff, so when I do my painting, as we're going to do, this won't warp. It might warp a little bit, but it won't warp a lot. And just flip around here. These are studies for commission I've been working on here, and I'll just do pen and ink. And with the pen and ink, if I can do that here, I'm using a Waterman fountain pen, and this is the Paris line. And this was $50, $75 kind of thing. They're fairly expensive. You can spend thousands on these things. Let's see if there's any, it's in there. And I'll use a very fine or a fine pen nib. We'll do a little bit of this maybe if we have time. And I'll just work out the designs and the rhythms. So figuring out the shadow shapes. And one of the many things I like about pen and ink is it's a directional. You're having to create a sense of line with tone. So which way you hatch can then inform how you're going to use your brush strokes in the painting. So you can be inventive. Like here, it's really showing the direction of the shadow, that plane going down, this boxy plane. So that's useful. And then I'll do, let's see here, if I can find, most of these are drawings. I'll do little gouache studies like we're going to do today. And I'll do them pretty careful little renderings, or I'll do them a little more stylized like this is. And as you'll see, I'll just lay it in like it's a watercolor issue, a watercolor painting, and then I'll come back over with the lighter halftones and highlights opaquely and build it up. And you can play with shapes, and I'll show you some of the advantages of it. So anyway, that's the bit I'm using. A bit of materials, and then the gouache, I'll show you the colors here in a second. Here's a couple other ones. Here's one. This was a real pale painting, so I'm not putting much color in it. We're going to put more color into it today. And you can see I worked out various variations on this, and then did a study for it. And you get to know the shapes and all that good stuff that's going on, the directional gestures, and whether the strokes are going to go with that or against that, and all that good stuff. So anyway, it's a fun medium to do. Here's more of a beginning. This is more how I would begin. Let me get that out of the way. All right, and the advantage of gouache is many. One, it's very expensive, which is not an advantage, but you use just little dabs of it. So when you look at my palette there, I've got big globs, kind of like toothpaste amount. You can see the scale, my finger here. They're fairly good size. You need just a fraction of that, just a tiny bit. I put out more so you can see the color, but you don't need much. And so the tubes, the tubes are small. You can see how small they are. And I'm using Winsor Newton. There's Grumbacher too. There's various, all the big brands do them. But one of the distinctions of gouache, it's watercolor based, of course, as opposed to oil color. base. It's basically an opaque watercolor, but you can also thin it out as I've done here, and it gives you just the same quality as watercolor, very much the same, but it has a little greater opacity, and its big distinction is it's the most densely packed medium in terms of the amount of pigment, the density of pigment within the medium, and so it's actually the chroma level, the color level is more intense. Oil looks about as intense because you have that beautiful sheen of the oil, but gouache actually has more chroma, more bang for the buck. So you get really nice, rich, intense colors here. Not easily. You can work thin as in glazes so that the ground comes through. You can build up more and more opaquely on top of it. Now, unlike oil or acrylic, once it dries, or casein, once it dries, this will dilute right back. If I put a little drop of water on any of this, it would dissolve right down through, and the pigment would drip off the picture. So it's delicate, but it's a lovely medium, and it's fun to sketch. And you can see on the back side of this that cardstock's not letting it through. So this was done pretty dry. If I do it really wet with lots of washes, it'll warble a little bit, but I actually kind of like that. It makes it look like the sketchbook's working for a living. So anyway, that's what we're going to look for, and then we're going to play a little bit with our color, a little bit more with our color theory, and you can see the warm and cool. This is a cool purple, a red purple, kind of a brown red purple, but that's relatively warmer than our cool green there. And then the cool green is warmer than the blue, and then we have yellow green. So you can see those temperature shifts. You can see where I've snuck in at the edges, really rich intensities and stuff. So there's all sorts of games we can play. Now, if we get in trouble with full color, and I'm not sure we'll have time to really delve into this much, but you can always go limited color, which is analogous is what it's called. Complementary is where you use warms like oranges and yellows, and cools like blues and purples and greens. There you're using more or less the whole rainbow of the color wheel. But analogous is working like we did that last one, where it was just in the golden hue. It was the yellow orange to red orange range. It was all in that, and then we'd get browner versions, more intense. So we play temperature and intensity games. We play our value games, but the temperature was all relative to that warm, fiery range. It didn't shift over to the cool side. You can also do monochrome, where it's really just one color, and you can cheat a little bit and open up a little bit, make it a little greener, a little purpler or something, as is happening here slightly. But basically it's all one color. It's dead blue. It's just orange. There's no yellow, orange, and red orange, just orange, or just very subtle shifts off that. And then you get that dewing effect, that tonalist effect, the Whistler Nocturne effect. And so it's powerful because it's distinctive. It doesn't have the power of all the rich variety of colors. It has the power of being focused with one color, more or less. And then that creates an attractive statement just because it's so unique. And it's very suggestive too. It gets moody. It's nighttime, it's sad, it's evergreen, it's out in the forest, everything's green on green on green, that kind of thing. So that can be fun too. And by limiting your color from the whole color wheel to a slice of the color wheel to just basically one point on the color wheel, you can focus the intention and you have less to worry about. All I have to do here is worry about values of blues and the intensity. Does it get a little grayer? Does it get a little more intense? And I don't have to worry about that temperature shift. So that's that. Okay, so the colors we're going to use, this is, I don't even know, Cad Red. So here's the Cad Red. That's my Fire Engine Red. Alizarin Crimson again, that's my Blue Red. I've got Ultramarine Blue, same blue, named blue in our oil paint. And I've got a Viridian. Let's see what it's called. Yeah, it is called Viridian. There's a couple different blue-greens. There's the same blue-green. So these are more or less what we used, almost exactly the same names. Naphthol Scarlet we had instead of Cad Red Medium. But it's, this is just Cadmium Red, not even Cad Red Medium. Brilliant Orange. Hansa Orange is another, or I'm sorry, Brilliant Yellow. Hansa Yellow. There's all sorts of different sunshine yellows. And then Zinc White is what you get here. And then I actually added Ivory Black to be able to get into the grays a little quicker. Otherwise, with this palette, I have to add basically the three primaries together. These three, or I could do these two maybe, but I got to work to get the gray, and then I control the value. With this, I'll gray it down since we're still not moving too far away from that Brown School palette. So we're just going to key it up. So we still have the red, blue, and yellow. It's just that we have two blues now, a very, very gray blue and a very bright blue. We have two reds. And Zorn does that oftentimes. He'd use a brick red, a real gray red, and then he'd use a bright red for the lipstick and the red rose and stuff. And then we added a green in there just for fun. So anyway, that's that. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a pencil, or here it's a mechanical pencil, and I'm going to sketch our reference here a little bit. I got to scoot just a little farther forward so I can see my reference. Let's see here. I'm going to move this a little bit so it's not reflecting. There we go. I think that's good, yeah. Okay, and then we've got this lovely pose here. And I'm just going to use the pencil to sketch in the model here. And I'm going to keep it pretty simple. We're just going to do a little study. Nothing too ambitious, I don't think. And I actually wasn't thinking when we set this up, I helped set this up. I've got you, it's off camera, but I have the ring binding here, and I'm a lefty, so I'm bumping that ring binding. So that's a little bit of a problem. I usually flip my sketchbooks upside down so that the ring is over here away from my hand, since I'm a lefty. Did I say I'm a lefty? I'm a lefty. And then I'm doing my same old construction technique, just the 5-minute pose or thereabouts. And we're going to keep this pretty light, of course, because we're going to put paint over it. And this isn't going to have, if I put it on really quick, it will, but it's not going to have the coverage. I'm going to be working in washes. So if I've got too dark a line there, it'll show through. And never make the mistake in anything, in oil, paint, acrylic, gouache, of using a ballpoint pen. I did that once as a student, and you've got that ink coming through your paint no matter what. It will always forever come through, and you're going to get the blue lines from your ballpoint ink coming in and bleeding into your lovely painting that you were about to get an A on, and then the teacher saw it starting to bleed. And we have all this wonderful environment that we'll play with tomorrow. I'm not going to do much about that here. to poke my head around a little bit to see past the reflections. That'll be my excuse. You always start out, have an excuse, some way to blame somebody else. So for me, it's going to be the reflections if I screw this up. And then if I do succeed, I can still say, it's amazing I did such an incredible job with all that was stacked against me, all the forces of antagonism. All right, so that's good enough. By golly. And let's do a little bit of the background in here. All right. That's good enough. All right, so I put down my pencil. I pick up my brushes. And the brushes we have are, this is a Utrecht brush, white nylon sable, it's synthetic sable. This is I believe this is real sable. This is a something, I can't even remember it, but anyway, it's synthetic too. Synthetic sable and synthetic sable. This is an American Painter, #2. And this is a filbert. Filbert has that round in it. There's the flats that look like boxy structures. And then there's the filberts and there's the rounds. And each of these, if you paint away from the attached in where it's glued, those hairs are glued in, you're going to get generally a nice stroke. If you push in, they can kind of grab and ball and gum up there, and these hairs can get driven inside, and then you're in big trouble there. So you want to try and clean any of your brushes this way, so you're moving away from that fixed into this more flexible end. And when you wash them with a little bit of soft soap, do it this way. Just keep rolling it over, then rinse it off, refill with a little dab of soap again, work it out, and then you end up with these in decent shape. All right, so let's go ahead and then lay in some of our colors. So this is more or less the value of my halftone, so we'll leave that there, and we'll pick up the darker background and then the really dark accents of the shadow and the hair and all that good stuff. So I'm going to keep it rather brown in that background. It's that nice kind of taupe color. I'm just going to dab in just a tip to thin it out. I need to get enough so that I can cover. So I'm going to use my 3 primaries. There's the brownness. We need to make it greener, so I'll add blue. Or I could just add the green, but there's already plenty of yellow in there. And that green is working pretty well. Still a little too intense, so I want the green to be less intense. I add a red. And then keep in mind, this is more intense, but it's going over a relatively gray environment. So the color here will be a bit different. Let me put it where you can see it than the color here. And I'm going to go ahead and take the whole head with the hair and the shadow. Put that in, and I'll go ahead and do the shadow shapes too for the body here. Now, sometimes you want to, quite often you want to do a soft edge. So what you can do is come back and soften it a little bit. You get a little bit of that softness back, depending on how much it's dried, because it will will dilute again, but you've also stained the paper. So once it settles in there for a moment or two, I can come over that and soften the edge maybe a little bit, like so, but also it will sometimes stain the paper, and so then you're kind of stuck there. Once it's done that damage, you can't undo it. So I'll show you how that works. So like the tummy area there, I want to be really nice and soft edge. So I'm going to take just water. I've got one brush that I'm just using for water. This will dry quick enough. And notice as I use more water, my page, like here, this is already warping a little bit. That's fine with me. I'm going to bring it down to where I want that that painted shape, that shadow shape to happen. I'm going to get a little bit more water, and a lot of this depends on how much is pigment, how much water is on your brush. So that takes a little bit of practice and trial and error. And so now we have a nice soft edge there. So, and notice I came in along that same zigzag technique, more or less. And I can soften that back. And I can do some damage control on this to fix bad choices there. But for the most part, that'll just, we're doing a sketch book technique. And so whatever little imperfections will probably just add to the charm of it. But we can always make corrections as we need to. I'll lose that leg, and I might decide to find it again, but I'm going to lose that. Let me grab a paper towel here. I'm just using regular old paper towels. You can see, or maybe you can, I think you can probably, how that softened that edge. And illustration paper, if you use like Strathmore Kid Finish or Bristol, the plate finish is so slick. That's hot press. That's so slick that your pigment sits on top, whatever it is. It doesn't embed into the paper. Anything that's a cold press is a little bit more absorbent, and oftentimes a lot more absorbent. And then you can, it'll settle in and look better. It's harder to change. In fact, sometimes you can't change it, but it's more lovely in terms of application. And see how that the ground is informing this. See how purple that gives? Now I added a lot more blue in there, but also it's going to gray out and settle that in and harmonize everything. Everything's going to be harmonized around this oatmeal color here. And we're just going to indicate this. This is for my my eventual big mural painting that I'll do for this for the Taj Mahal. They need a new piece in the Taj Mahal, I hear. So that's just indicating of what I would put in a later comp or in the finish, just to indicate color relationships and such. All right, and then we'll want to make sure that dries a little bit so that it's not, I wouldn't want, see how this is dripping down. And quite often I have this on an angle. You can see where I'm at here. So it's dripping. I actually like that. In fact, sometimes people will, encourage those drips, and they'll be painting here and then keep it extra wet, and you'll get that drip going down there. And that can add to the kind of the charm of it. It becomes an actual technique. Let's see here. So we're going to go into the cooler lights, cooler ambient environment. So I'm going to take that same brown and push it quite a bit bluer. And then I'm going to let that leg and foot, I took off the pigment and just let it be slightly stained. And then that's going to drop into this cool light. All right, let's see now. So I've got it blocked in really very simply. It's more or less what we did with our oil paint. Just has a little bit different grab to it, different quality to it. All right, so let's see here. Let's take some nice rich orange, yellow orange. I'm going to just lighten it a little bit, and let's see what that does for us. Now notice I'm still working out of this brown range. The Brown school simply says that anything that's not in direct light goes into a non-color brown. And notice the natural gradation that happens, zigzagging. This stuff's not moving. In oil paint, those things would go blending together, wouldn't it? Here I've got, it cuts me a little bit of slack. And then I'm going to let this go into more of the sunburnt arm. And that's a great way to get a variety in the skin tones. We want that variety. I'm going to do a cooler version of that same red, orange, and bring that in here. See how I like it? So I started at the edge and bring that in. Try a little more of a blue-green version of that. Blue, come on out. So it goes into the olive range. Notice everything's harmonizing because of that oatmeal color underneath. And because everything has some of that earthy color, that earthy brown that I started with, and then it gets a more orange version, yellow version, that kind of thing. All right, so I'm going to give it just a second to settle down. Notice, like in here, this will show up probably a little less once it dries, but that's kind of a watermark idea, and that's one of the pleasures of doing this, is you can get these watermarks, and the fact that it's kind of ragged. Can you see that? Let's do it down here. The fact that it's kind of ragged is almost like it's a soft edge. And you can let that dry, and it'll dry in a couple minutes. Then you can come back inside that, and you don't have to do as much rendering. And you can do a little spot of I'll show a couple of them floating around. But for example, the shoulder here, what I'll do is I'll draw in that shape. And let's go ahead and take it down here too. And it goes into the background. That I don't want to separate, I want it to group, so I'll do that. Okay, and then I'm going to come back, clean that brush, have it loaded with water, and I'll soften that edge a little bit, like that. Or instead, and if I do this it may bleed out, but I'll come in and I'll fill that with pigment. So I'm loading up my brush with a lot of liquid. There it is. Now see it drip down? Those are things that I couldn't have rendered in. That could be a big mess I have to fix, or could be a really lovely passage of paint just as an abstract possibility. Okay, and notice how just by silhouettes, without any rendering, shadow shapes, or almost no rendering, light shapes, and then a little soft edges between, I create these interesting silhouettes. And notice how the advantage of pushing that arm into a sunburnt solution now frames it really beautifully against the torso, at least I like it. And so you can see this lovely watery shape of the torso left over, and that becomes kind of lost into the background there. So we see that shape first. That becomes our first read. The soft and lost edge of the hair over the jawline, again, we don't get to see then that solution. You know, we don't get that information, so it keeps us down here a little bit more. All right, so let's see what we want to do here. We could put in her red hair. I'm going to take the darker red because I want it to set into the cooler shadows. I want it to kind of be less important than this, but a nice little kick of color and of temperature. So I'm going to pick this up in here. Here's the bobbed hairstyle. And I'm going to keep it a soft edge at first. So I'm going to go ahead and soften this. And let it be I do that if I want it to be a little less dark. I'll leave that watermark there. Or if I want to dry it a little faster. And we'll just leave that as a possibility for taking it farther or obscuring it more. And we could even pick up the a hint of the, or more than a hint of the color. And then that, since it's laying on moist paper, I can bleed that off with a little bit of effort. And so I added a little bit of white to that so it popped up in value. When that dries, I can glaze red over it. I'll show you how, and set that back so it's not quite so hot.
Well, the great thing about MMA is that each teacher brings something that adds to how you approach the art. I especially love Steve Huston. His is very ordered and structured and very repeatable. That's what's really exciting about his courses is he produces gorgeous stuff, but he shows you exactly how to build up to that.
And it's like any new friend. You're painting, there's going to be a while where you're going to have that getting to know each other period, where you're kind of tentative, you ask safe questions, you wait politely for the answer, and then you're careful not to offend. And then as you get more comfortable, then you get going and ad-libbing and throwing out this idea just to see how they react, even if you're not sure you believe it yourself. And then you get more comfortable, you get more ambitious, and you're willing to take a few risks. And the friend will forgive you if you screw up, and even kind of bail you out sometimes and let you know what you might do to fix it. So I'm going to leave that tired metaphor and come back. And so I'm just going to play with shapes and values and colors on the base of a pretty okay base of information that I've developed here. And if I don't do it exactly right, this gets a little too much, my friend will let me know. And if I never fix it, my friend will forgive me. But that's what it is like when you're getting into this kind of stuff, is you're just kind of playfully searching, and don't feel too pressured. You're only on camera with thousands of people watching you. It's like Super Bowl Sunday. I think we had 20,000 students. So we're going to have a really long crit this afternoon or tomorrow morning. Catch up. Okay, now I'm going to get some more paint out here and work a little bit more opaquely just for fun. And that again will be a whole different color range. So I would want to, this color here is going to get much darker when it dries out. So notice I've been working transparently and semi-opaque. Now this is opaque. And like I said, it will darken down some, quite a bit actually, probably. I'm going to clean all that paint off and come in and bleed it, just to show you different ways to go here. And just by thinning out that paint, it'll naturally gradate a little bit, and also it'll settle down, and this will come through as it darkens. You can see it darkening now. And now I can take those strokes and blend them together. So lots of possibilities for fun. And again, just like we added some lights, add some darks to feel, and notice again those darks, as they dry, they'll get lighter. The lights, as they dry, they get darker, and so everything kind of moves towards the middle. And that's kind of a safe place to be too, so you're in that subtler realm, and so you for a long time have room to maneuver into a more contrasting solution. And this kind of slightly out of control, kind of just laying things in and then seeing what happens, as opposed to this more careful deliberation, gives you some happy accidents, we hope, or it gives you some messes to fix. But in either case, you're going to shake things up, and you'll learn from it, and you might be pleasantly surprised by it. Wouldn't that be nice? So I'm always looking for something to surprise me. And it doesn't mean you'll like the surprise, but we want to do something. I don't want to do this same painting again and again and again for the next 30 years. I want to come up with new possibilities. The only way to do that is to shake things up. And try things in at least a little bit different way than you're used to. All right, so let's see here. I'm going to come over the top of this for a second, just take a look. And you can see, well, maybe you can't see, but it's warbled pretty well. It's bending like this, like that, and I like that. I'll bring these sketchbooks sometimes to the shows and set them out. I don't sell them, but I'll put them out and let people look through them. And those crinkled pages, it shows kind of the gritty process, the adventure and discovery that art really is. And so I like that. It shows off rather than this perfectly framed, perfectly stretched monument. It's this kind of working class, get your fingers dirty kind of pursuit, which is really closer to the truth. Okay, let's let that dry a little bit. I'll beat it up a little bit here to make it dry a little bit more. And then I'll come over that as I promised to show you how to change that color a little bit. Let me just soften that up here a bit. We're at about 4:15 LA time, so we're going to want to stop here pretty quick. Okay, and what you're going to want to do is, if you have anything more for me to see, I think we already have some up, I can't remember, but get those up now, and then when I take a break here, I'll come back and critique your guys' work, and then we'll have time for me to do one more demo, again in oil, or I could do some, well, I'll say, if you guys want me to do some pen and ink, let me know, but I'll do that tomorrow maybe. And these can be just little notations of what I would like to do in the finish, you know, on my big 7-foot figure. And I'm actually working on a series that'll come out at some point. I've got some commissions I'm finishing first, but a couple of years will come out, and there are these kind of really smoky, lost and found female figures. And this is great for that, because notice I have to come back and find the other side. I've lost the shadow in the background. I've lost some of the shadow in the foreground. There's a lot of leaky action going on here, and I like that. It makes it more interesting to me. That lost and found. You've got to search, and you got to help me out now to make sense of this. So I like that idea. So I'm going to do a series of big nudes like that, almost like they're underwater. So almost like the forms are starting to float away. And I'm going to go on for the 3rd time or 4th time and pick up that little accent at the armpit. Okay. There's that cool light. Water, clean my brush off, water. Let that fade into the surroundings. Okay. All right, so I want that highlight on the breast to cue down a little bit. It looks a little bit like an automotive highlight to show off the reflective metal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take whatever color I want. I'm just going to glaze it into a pink. I'm going to take my my orange color, and I'm going to get it nice and wet. I'm going to take most of that off, and I'm going to glaze over it, and then I'll let it dry. Sometimes I'll even have a hair dryer and dry them. Or I can use a dry brush and drag it. See how it barely covers, and I can just cross-hatch. Whoops. Cross-hatch over it. If I go back and forth too much, then it's going to wet down that pink and ruin it. So I need to make sure I only go over it once or twice and then stop. So go over it again. And stop. Now I'm going to go over that highlight again. And this time, let me get a little bit more pigment on that. There we go. And I can do that 5 or 6 times, or I can say, you know, I just can't wait that long, or it's not quite working. So I'll come back into the highlight, and now I'm going to zigzag it down and back, and I'm going to dilute it. And I'll come and take that white off that I've pulled off of it. And get that out of there, or just reduce it way down, as I said. And soften those up and such. Okay, so let's notice in this one I've over 4 or 5 times, or however many times I did it, I build up that highlight. And notice what's going on here. I'll look for these shapes here. Let's see, let me do it again. I'll start looking for these kind of key lock shapes where I'll bring that hip down into the thigh, and I'll have the thigh around it locking. So that's what's going on here. Let me darken the whoop. Gotta let that dry, I guess. I'm gonna pull that back into the shadows and kind of dig out the interior of that so I get that watermark, and that'll give me that core and cast shadow edge.